My brother-in-law schemed to grab my property through county efforts for barely 1% of its true value after I invested 12 years building it. Hey everyone, Leon here. This isn't a story I've shared openly before. It all wrapped up about 8 months ago, and I've waited until the dust truly settled. Names and some details are changed, but every single thing else, it's exactly how it happened. I was 26, 2 years into my marriage, working as a union lineman. That's when I bought 15 acres of steep, rocky mountain land in western North Carolina. I got it for practically nothing. This land, it changed everything for me. Real estate agents just shook their heads. It was too steep to build on, too rocky for crops, wrong soil for anything profitable. The previous owner had inherited it, paid taxes for 20 years, never even stepped foot on it. When I offered $12,000 cash, he couldn't sign the papers fast enough. Lineman work pays well, but it demands everything. Climbing poles in January ice storms, 16-hour shifts when a transformer blows and half a town goes dark. I was willing. Storm restoration calls took me everywhere, Florida, Louisiana, wherever the union sent crews. The safety culture kept me alive up there, and those steady paychecks, they built my escape plan, month by month. I lived cheap. One-bedroom apartment, second-hand furniture, a 10-year-old Ford Ranger, rice and beans most nights. My coworkers thought I was either broke or insane, saving 70% of every paycheck. But I had a vision. I wanted land of my own, something nobody could take from me. My wife, Harper, thought I'd completely lost my mind when I showed her the property. It was a north-facing slope in the Blue Ridge foothills, 40 minutes from Asheville, on roads that got impossible in winter. Accessible only by a gravel road that washed out every spring. No utilities. No flat ground bigger than a basketball court on the entire 15 acres. Just rocks, rhododendron thickets, and scrubby hardwood clinging to the mountainside. That first day, Harper stood at the edge, looked at the slope disappearing into the trees, and asked, "So, what's the plan here?" Because I'm not seeing a house, a road, or anything remotely normal. "You're looking at it like a problem," I told her. "I'm looking at it like a setup." "A setup for what?" she replied. "A twisted ankle?" "For a business," I said. "Just give me a few years, you'll get it." She just sighed. "I married a man with ambition and zero fear." "That's concerning." But I saw Christmas trees. That north-facing slope, the rocky, well-drained soil at 3,000 feet elevation, perfect conditions for Fraser firs. The choose and cut farms scattered across these mountains pulled in serious money during the 6 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Families drove hours from Charlotte, Atlanta, even Florida, to cut their own trees, buy wreaths, make memories. Fraser firs take 8 to 12 years to reach prime selling height. That's why nobody new entered the market. It was too long to wait for your first real paycheck. But I had patience. I had a union job funding the operation for as long as it took. And I had 15 acres nobody else wanted, because they couldn't see what I saw. The first 3 years nearly broke me physically. Every day off meant clearing brush, hauling rocks, cutting drainage channels by hand to prevent erosion, terracing the gradual slopes into plantable rows. I'd work 12 hours on the power lines, drive an hour to the property, then clear brush with a chainsaw until dark made it too dangerous. My hands were always torn up from saw work and granite edges. I dropped 20 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. Some nights, I just slept in my truck because driving home safely wasn't an option. In year 3, I planted my first 2,000 Fraser fir seedlings, each about 18 inches tall. Nearly half died that first summer. I didn't understand my own drainage patterns yet. Low spots held too much moisture, and root rot took them. I replanted the next spring, better site selection, and added another 1,500 seedlings in a new section I'd cleared. Years 5 through 7 were all about learning the real work, shearing trees every summer to shape them, spraying for pests, mowing between rows, fertilizing precisely. Each task had specific timing. Mess it up, and you'd set the whole operation back a year. I kept planting new sections every spring, building inventory for the future. By year 9, my oldest trees from that first batch reached 6 feet. With new rounds planted every year, I had trees at different stages of maturity across the property. The farm was actually starting to look like an operation. And that's when Harper's brother, Peter, started coming around more often. He'd grown up in the county, knew everybody from the sheriff to the clerk. He worked in real estate and general contracting, always had a deal working. He'd walk my tree rows and comment on how much work I was putting into land that wasn't worth much on paper. He said it friendly enough, but something about the way he assessed the property always felt more like a calculation than a compliment. Year 10, I sold my first Christmas trees to the public. Simple choose and cut. A warming shed I'd built from scrap, a cash box bolted to a table, handsaws for customers. That first season, I cleared $8,000 in 6 weeks. It felt incredible. By year 12, the transformation was complete. Fraser firs were in full rotation across all 15 acres. Over 7,000 trees in the ground, from knee-high transplants to 9-foot specimens. I'd built a proper farm store, insulated, wood stove, display racks for the wreaths and garland I made from harvest trimmings. Nothing went to waste. Branches from cut trees became wreaths. Smaller trimmings became garland. Even the stumps got ground into mulch I sold to landscapers. We added hot spiced apple juice and kettle corn on weekends. Families lingered longer, bought more. We hosted school field trips, scout groups. The county tourism board featured us alongside farms that had been running for generations. I quit the lineman job at the end of year 12. Hardest decision I ever made, walking away from union benefits and a guaranteed paycheck. But the farm was generating more annual revenue than my wages, and I couldn't manage both anymore. Harper handled the store and customer experience. I managed the trees and maintenance. We worked well together. Our marriage was solid, built on shared purpose. Years 13 and 14, business boomed. Repeat customers brought their own kids. We expanded the store, added an event space. Local papers ran features on the lineman who turned worthless mountain land into a destination farm. Then, the county sent a letter about property line discrepancies. And suddenly, Peter's helpful suggestions felt calculated, ominous. The letter arrived in early March of year 13, buried amongst seed catalogs and equipment invoices. Official county letterhead, formal language about reviewing property boundaries due to potential survey errors from decades ago. It suggested our property might be smaller, that some of our land might fall within an unrecorded county right-of-way. I called the assessor's office, got bounced between 4 people before anyone would even discuss it. A woman with a bored voice said these reviews happened periodically when the county updated GIS mapping systems. Routine verification. Nothing to worry about. But I worried. The government doesn't send certified letters about property boundaries unless someone has a reason to question them. That Saturday, Peter showed up while I was checking trees for winter damage. "Heard you got a letter from the county," he said, hands in his pockets. "Those things can turn into a mess fast." "It's just a boundary review, supposedly," I replied. "Sure. And sometimes supposedly turns into sign here," he pressed. "Why do you care all of a sudden?" "Because you're family, and I know how this county plays." His eagerness felt wrong. Peter had always been mildly interested in the farm, but never this invested in county paperwork. That night at dinner, I mentioned his visit to Harper. She said Peter knew the county government better than anyone and was genuinely trying to help. Said I should take him up on it instead of being stubborn. I didn't call Peter. Instead, I drove to the county clerk's office. I started pulling records. Our county had a public portal for most documents. Anything else came with a simple written request. Surveys, deed chains, transportation committee minutes going back 3 years. 2 weeks later, it clicked. The county had been discussing a road improvement project for nearly 2 years. Widening, realigning the main route to the interstate, eliminating dangerous curves. Legitimate on paper. But the proposed alignment didn't follow the existing road. It cut across private property, requiring land from 7 owners. My 15 acres sat right in the middle of this preferred corridor. A developer, Consolidated Mountain Properties, had been buying land on both sides of the proposed route for over 2 years. Their preliminary development plans showed a resort needing direct highway access. The road project wasn't about safety. It was about building infrastructure for private development with public money. Then I found Commissioner Eckert's financial disclosures. They showed a consulting relationship with Blue Ridge Advisory Group. State corporate records showed Blue Ridge was a subsidiary of Consolidated Mountain Properties. And then, there it was, Peter's name. Buyer agent for 3 of Consolidated Mountain's acquisitions, totaling over $2 million. Peter wasn't helping me navigate a process. He was working for the very people trying to take my land. I told Harper what I'd found that night. Showed her Peter's name on the transactions, the timeline connecting his deals to the road project. She listened, then said there had to be an explanation. Peter did real estate all over the county. Maybe he'd taken the listings without knowing about the bigger picture. She said I was connecting dots that might not connect. I understood her position. He was her brother. But I asked her to be careful what she shared with him until we understood more. 2 weeks later, Commissioner Eckert and 2 officials showed up at my farm unannounced. They stayed near the driveway, acting like an official site visit. Technically, they hadn't crossed into the fields, but it was still my property, and they hadn't asked permission. They photographed buildings and trees from where they stood, asked questions about my operation. Eckert mentioned the county would make offers soon, said they preferred working cooperatively. I asked what kind of figure they were thinking. We're looking at something in the $15,000 range for the land, plus a little for improvements, he said, flatly. You're joking, I stared at him. I'm not. That's what the appraisal supports. My trees alone are worth more than that, standing here. I shot back, disbelief rising. We're not buying your business, Mr. Leon. We're acquiring land. I asked him to walk me through that calculation. Their appraiser had used comps for undeveloped mountain land. Steep terrain, limited access, no utilities, $800 to $1,200 per acre, adjusted down further for my slope and access difficulty. A base land value of roughly $15,000. Add depreciated replacement cost for buildings, subtract for access issues, and that was their number. The appraiser never even set foot on the property. Assessment based on records and aerial photography. I pointed out this wasn't undeveloped land. This was a working Christmas tree farm with 12 years of inventory in the ground. Over 7,000 trees at various stages, representing tens of thousands in seedling costs, soil amendments, pest control. My accountant had valued the operation as a going concern at just over $2 million when I refinanced the previous year. Their offer was barely 1% of that. Eckert said trees were considered agricultural crops attached to condemned land, valued at salvage cost, not retail. Business goodwill wasn't compensable in eminent domain proceedings. The county was acquiring land, not a business. I asked if their appraiser had any experience valuing working agricultural operations rather than raw dirt. He just said I should think carefully about my options and consult with someone who understood local processes. After they left, I checked my phone. A text from Peter, "Commissioner stopped by? Can help you understand the situation." He'd known they were coming. My blood ran cold. I spent 6 weeks preparing for a fight, all while maintaining normal operations. Every interaction with county officials? Documented. Every county vehicle on my property? Photographed. I requested copies of every public record related to the road project, the land acquisitions, Eckert's voting history. I built a detailed timeline on poster board, showing how the pieces connected. I learned what protections actually existed for working farms. North Carolina's present use value taxation program, which I'd been in for years, provided reduced property taxes for bona fide agricultural operations. That enrollment created a paper trail documenting my farm's continuous agricultural use, and it required rollback taxes if the land was converted. The state's forestry management program required the county to consider long-term timber value in any taking. My farm had an approved erosion control plan on file because of the steep terrain. Any road construction on my property would require updating that plan and demonstrating adequate sediment control. The mountain creek running through my lower section fed a watershed supplying drinking water to 3 communities downstream. State environmental regulations required formal consultation with those water authorities before approving projects that could affect drainage. None of these were magic shields that would stop eminent domain cold. But each one created procedural requirements. Each requirement generated documentation and review periods. Each layer of complexity bought time and created obstacles for anyone trying to push through a fast taking. I started attending county commission meetings every Thursday night. Sat in the same seat, third row, where all 5 commissioners could see me watching them. Brought a notebook, wrote down everything said about the road project, land acquisitions, budget. During public comment, I asked polite questions: environmental review status, traffic studies, notification timelines, cost-benefit analysis methodology. The commissioners visibly squirmed. They'd shuffle papers, avoid eye contact, give vague answers. Then, I asked the question that changed everything. Keep your comments to the project, not personal allegations. Commissioner Grimes cut in before I could finish. This is the project. Conflicts of interest are part of the project, I stated calmly. Commissioner Ortega leaned forward. Sir, state your question clearly. Why wasn't Commissioner Eckert recused when he has a disclosed financial relationship tied to the developer? That's not how this works. Eckert blustered. Grimes jumped back in. Out of order. Direct complaints through proper channels. I stayed calm. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking about ethics compliance based on the Commissioner's own filed disclosures. The public has a right to understand whether recusal protocols are being followed. Grimes threatened to rule me out of order for harassment. Ortega looked around the room, then said she'd allow the question if I could cite the specific document. I'd brought copies. I read from Eckert's annual disclosure, identifying his consulting relationship with Blue Ridge Advisory Group, including compensation. Then from state corporate records, showing Blue Ridge as a wholly owned subsidiary of Consolidated Mountain Properties. Then I noted Consolidated Mountain was the primary beneficiary of the proposed road alignment. Eckert's face went scarlet. He claimed no conflict, said his consulting work was unrelated to transportation, that Blue Ridge served multiple clients. I asked what services Blue Ridge provided that were unrelated to real estate development, given its parent company's sole business was real estate development. Grimes interrupted again. Inappropriate. Potentially defamatory. Move to next item. Ortega hesitated. Then she said the question deserved an answer, given the documentation I'd cited. 2 other commissioners nodded. Eckert said he'd provide written clarification through proper channels. The meeting moved on, but I'd made my point. It was on the official minutes. Several people in the gallery had been taking notes. A reporter from the local weekly approached me in the parking lot, asking for copies. Other property owners found me afterward. Nora, who ran a small apple orchard that would be bisected. Tom and Betty Aldrich, whose family had farmed this area for 4 generations. Margaret, a retired teacher who'd spent her savings building a dream home. A young couple, Jake and Melissa Warren, blindsided. All had received similar letters. All had been visited by county officials. All had been given lowball verbal offers and told to consult with people who understood local processes. We started meeting weekly at Nora's farmhouse kitchen. 6 families total. Our properties covered almost the entire proposed corridor. Peter's name appeared throughout their documentation too. He'd contacted 3 of the families, offering to help them understand their options. He'd been the buyer's agent on Consolidated Mountain purchases near 2 of the targeted parcels. Harper noticed I was distracted, working late in my office, taking calls I'd step outside to answer, attending evening meetings I didn't fully explain. She asked what was going on. I told her about the coalition, the pattern we'd documented, the evidence showing Peter was deeper into this than just taking random real estate listings. I showed her the specific transactions with his name, the timeline showing coordination. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said Peter had called her that afternoon. He'd asked specific questions about our situation, if we'd hired a lawyer, what our plans were, our timeline. She'd answered without thinking much about it because he was family, asking about family. I told her I understood, but asked her not to share information about our legal strategy with him anymore. Because there was clear evidence Peter was working with the other side. Anything she told him would likely reach the county and the developer within hours. She agreed, but I could see it bothered her. Deeply. The formal eminent domain notice arrived 8 weeks after my first commission meeting appearance. Certified mail. Official county seal. Dense legal language citing public necessity for transportation infrastructure improvement. The county declared an urgent need for a portion of my property. They gave me 30 days to respond to their compensation offer, or they'd proceed with formal condemnation. I found Miriam through a property rights legal organization in Raleigh. She specialized in eminent domain abuse cases and had won significant judgments across North Carolina. She asked detailed questions about my creek and whether there had been any state environmental consultation for the road project. When I said no, she nodded, saying the county's environmental documentation was suspiciously thin for a project affecting a protected watershed that supplied municipal drinking water downstream. She agreed to take my case. Miriam challenged the eminent domain on 3 grounds. First, the county failed to demonstrate genuine public necessity since the project primarily benefited private development. Second, the environmental review was incomplete, missing required consultations with downstream water authorities. Third, Commissioner Eckert's ongoing participation, despite his financial relationships, created procedural defects, tainting the entire approval process. She also filed discovery requests, demanding all communications between county officials and Consolidated Mountain Properties, all internal documents about the project's cost-benefit justification, and all correspondence between Eckert and Blue Ridge Advisory. The county's response was immediate and coordinated. Within 2 weeks of our filing, 4 different agencies showed up: Fire Marshal, Health Department, Building Official, State Agriculture. Each inspection hit during pre-season prep, when I should have been finishing shearing and setting up for opening day. Each inspector asked questions that suggested someone had briefed them on weak points to probe. I handled each visit calmly, provided every document, made each inspector put findings in writing. I built a file documenting the coordinated timing. None found violations, permits current, records complete, facilities met code. But together, they consumed 2 weeks of my schedule during the most critical time of year. Pure harassment. Harper called me from work one afternoon, sounding completely confused. She said Peter had left her a voicemail asking detailed questions about our court filings. He'd mentioned Miriam by name, asked about specific motions we'd filed, about discovery requests. We hadn't told anyone outside the coalition about our legal strategy. I hadn't even told Harper which specific documents Miriam had submitted. How could Peter possibly know those things? I told her someone at the county or the developer's legal team was probably feeding him information because he was coordinating with them. This was exactly why I'd asked her to be careful. She was quiet. Then she said she hadn't told Peter anything about our legal filings. She'd kept her promise. If Peter knew those details, he was getting them from somewhere inside the county's legal response. That landed with her. Peter knowing things he couldn't have learned from Harper meant he had inside access to information being shared only between adversarial legal teams. Which meant he wasn't just a real estate agent who'd happened to take some listings. He was coordinated with the scheme at a deeper level than we'd understood. She said she wanted to talk to him directly and get answers. The Saturday before Thanksgiving was our busiest choose and cut day. I'd been preparing for weeks. Parking overflow marked. Safety zone around the SAW station. Tags and pricing sheets organized. Cash box stocked. Credit card reader charged. Warming shed heated, stocked with Harper's hot spiced apple juice and baked goods. Wreaths hung. Customers started arriving at 9 sharp. Each group got a safety orientation. I worked the field, Harper handled the store. By early afternoon, we'd sold 40 trees. The parking area was full. I directed overflow to the designated area in the lower field. A family from Charlotte told me they'd been coming for 4 years, wouldn't go anywhere else. A retired couple mentioned they'd read the newspaper article about our situation with the county and wanted to support someone standing up for property rights. This warmed my heart. Around 3, Peter showed up. Unannounced. He walked through the field towards me, hands in his jacket pockets, like he was inspecting inventory, not visiting family. He knew I couldn't make a scene with customers watching. He waited until I helped a customer load a 10-foot tree onto their SUV. Then he started his pitch. "Been thinking about your situation," he said. Understand you feel strongly about the farm, but you need to consider Harper's future. He said the county's offer wasn't great, but he might be able to negotiate better terms if I'd let him help. I told him, Peter, this isn't the time or place. He kept talking. Fighting the county is expensive, usually pointless. Most people who resist end up with less than the original offer after legal fees eat everything up. I've seen it happen many times. I asked him to leave. I have customers to help. This conversation is over. He left, but not before looking around at my operation, my customers, my store, like he was assessing assets. Harper confronted Peter directly about his involvement at a family dinner 2 weeks later. She started casual, asked about his business, if development deals kept him busy. He'd been normal, even bragging about commissions. Then she asked specifically about Consolidated Mountain Properties, if he was still working for them. His demeanor changed instantly. He said he'd done some transactions, but it was standard agency work. She asked if those transactions had anything to do with the road project affecting our farm. He got defensive. Said she was starting to sound like me. Said he was trying to help the family, and it was insulting to question his motives. Then she asked how he'd known about our court filings and Miriam's name when she hadn't told him anything. He mumbled, people talked. Small county. Harper countered, I haven't told anyone about the specific motions filed. Nobody outside our legal team should have known those details unless they had access to the county's response documents. Peter changed approach. You need to convince Leon to settle before he destroys your finances. The county always wins these fights. The smart move is taking the money. Harper, her voice rising, asked, why do you care so much about what we do with our own property? He said he cared about his sister's future. Then he said something that broke her trust completely. He said the road was going to happen regardless of what we did. Said the development was already funded, and the approvals were essentially done. Said our property was going to be acquired one way or another. The only question was whether we got reasonable compensation or got dragged through court and ended up with less. She asked him how he knew the development was already approved when the road project was supposedly still under review and the eminent domain was being challenged in court. He didn't have an answer. She came home that night, told me every word. She said Peter had talked about our property like it was already gone. The following Thursday evening, Peter showed up at our house while Harper was at her mother's. I was doing equipment maintenance when I heard his truck on the gravel. He knocked like he expected to be welcomed. When I opened the door, he launched into his pitch. Said he cared about Harper and couldn't watch me destroy their future over stubbornness. Said the county had finalized their offer and it was the best I'd get anywhere. Said I needed to take it and let this be finished. I asked him, how much money do you stand to make if Consolidated Mountains project goes through? He didn't deny involvement. Said he was a professional doing legitimate business. Said the road was happening whether I liked it or not because the money was already committed. Said the smart move was getting the best deal instead of wasting everything on lawyers. Then he crossed a line. Look, I'm trying to save you from getting crushed. You're not saving me, Peter. You're selling me. My voice was quiet, but I could feel the anger churning. You need to think about Harper. Don't you dare use my wife as a bargaining chip, I spat. It would be a shame if inspectors started caring a lot more during your busiest weeks. He was threatening me. I told him, I've been recording since I opened the door. He laughed. North Carolina's one-party consent. It won't prove anything except I tried to give good advice to stubborn family. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. And don't come back. Any future communication goes through my attorney. If you set foot on my property again, I'm filing a trespassing complaint with the sheriff. He left, but sat in his truck at the end of my driveway for 15 minutes, making phone calls. Harper got home around 11. I showed her the recording. Let her hear her brother threaten our livelihood, dismiss her concerns, reveal how deep he was in this. She sat on the couch, hands pressed against her face. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, she was done with him. I filed a trespassing complaint with the sheriff the next morning, documenting Peter's visit and his threats. Miriam added the recording to our court filings as evidence of coordinated intimidation connected to the eminent domain proceedings. She forwarded copies to the State Bureau of Investigation's Public Corruption Unit. The FBI opened a preliminary inquiry within 10 days. An investigator contacted Miriam, requesting our complete documentation. The judge granted a preliminary injunction, blocking all county action against our property until the legal questions were resolved. No seizure, no condemnation, no force-taking. Harper called her mother and explained she wouldn't attend family events where Peter was present. That conversation was brutal. Her mother cried, accused her of destroying the family over a land dispute. Harper told her mother that Peter had threatened their livelihood to close a business deal. She said she'd chosen her marriage over her brother's greed. She held that line, even when it cost her. 3 weeks after the injunction, a lawyer for Consolidated Mountain called with a private settlement offer. Full market value based on an independent appraisal, plus a premium for immediate agreement. Real money. More than I'd realistically make in 4 years of normal operation. The lawyer was professional, said his client respected what I'd built. Said the offer had no connection to county proceedings, just a private transaction between willing parties. I told him I'd think about it. I spent a week considering. The money made financial sense. We could relocate, start fresh somewhere else. But I also knew why they were offering. They needed my parcel specifically. Without my 15 acres, the whole corridor didn't connect. Every other piece they'd assembled was worthless if they couldn't get through my land to the highway. That's why they were willing to pay real money now, when the county had offered scraps before. I talked to the coalition. 2 others had received similar offers. Nora was considering acceptance because of health stress. Tom said taking the money would prove intimidation worked, and they'd just do it to the next person. I thought about 14 years transforming this worthless mountain. About walking away because someone with more money wanted what I'd built. I called back and declined. Miriam had been cultivating media contacts. A reporter named Jackson Hale at the Asheville paper had been investigating regional corruption for years, but never had enough documentation. Our case gave him everything. His article ran front page. Road project documents reveal developer ties to county officials. The timeline, the acquisitions, Eckert's relationships, the pressure pattern. Peter's name appeared prominently as the agent facilitating developer purchases while pressuring his own family to surrender their property. That Christmas season? It was our best ever. People came specifically because they'd read the story. Families told us they were proud to support someone fighting back. We sold out weeks early. The commission held an emergency meeting in January. The room was packed beyond capacity, people lined up in the hallway. Local business owners, farmers who recognized the pattern, retirees who'd moved here specifically because they trusted the community. 3 major campaign donors sent letters withdrawing support from commissioners who'd backed the project. 4 commissioners voted to suspend the road project pending independent review. Eckert voted alone against, then held a press conference, accusing colleagues of caving to media pressure. The public didn't buy it. Not anymore. Peter's professional life collapsed completely in the months following the article. In a county this small, reputation is everything. His listings dried up. Clients stopped returning calls. The local board of realtors opened a formal ethics inquiry after multiple complaints about his conduct. Rather than face formal proceedings that would create a detailed public record, Peter surrendered his real estate license voluntarily. The surrender stopped the formal process, but the inquiry remained in board record. Any future licensing application would require disclosure. He'd have to explain to any broker, any client, any partner. The professional damage was permanent. Harper's relationship with her mother eventually stabilized after months of painful conversation. Her mother finally accepted that Peter had become someone willing to hurt his own family for money. She said she didn't understand how that had happened to her son. The SBI investigation expanded quickly once they started pulling records. Subpoenas for financial records from Consolidated Mountain Properties, Blue Ridge Advisory Group, and Commissioner Eckert's personal bank accounts revealed the full scope of what had been happening. Eckert had received over $300,000 from developer-connected entities over a 4-year period. The payments were disguised as consulting fees, speaking honoraria, and political contributions routed through PACs that were later traced back to Consolidated Mountains principals. Bank records showed deposits hitting Eckert's accounts within days of key commission votes that advanced the road project. The emails were devastating. Communications between Eckert and the developer's representatives discussing which property owners were vulnerable to pressure, which ones needed aggressive tactics, and how to structure approvals to minimize scrutiny. Peter appeared in several threads as the contact for applying family pressure on our property. One message noted he'd assured them he could convince his sister's husband to see reason. The Attorney General's office got involved with local prosecutors. They filed criminal charges against Eckert for bribery, corruption, and abuse of public office. The developer's CEO faced charges for conspiracy to commit bribery and making illegal payments. Peter was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the public court filings. Being named in court documents created a permanent public record that any future employer, business partner, or licensing board would discover with a basic background search. The eminent domain case collapsed. The county filed to dismiss their own condemnation, acknowledging the project lacked legitimate purpose and the approval process was compromised. The judge granted dismissal with prejudice, meaning they could never refile. Miriam negotiated settlements for all coalition members, full reimbursement of legal fees, formal written apologies, policy reform commitments. My settlement totaled $41,000 for legal expenses alone. But the real victory wasn't the money. The county commission adopted new conflict of interest rules, requiring recusal from any matter where officials had financial relationships with affected parties. They strengthened property owner protections for eminent domain proceedings. Eckert's trial lasted 2 weeks. Bank records, emails, testimony from county staff who'd been pressured to expedite approvals. The jury convicted him on all counts after 4 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in state prison, plus full restitution. The developer company went into receivership. Their land holdings sold at auction for fractions of what they'd paid. Conservation groups bought most of the parcels. Peter, last I heard, was doing property management work in Tennessee, not real estate sales. The licensing surrender and court naming followed him. No legitimate brokerage would take the liability risk of hiring someone with his documented history. Harper exchanges occasional texts with him about their mother's health. Nothing more. I expanded the operation the following spring. Bought an adjacent 20 acres from the developer bankruptcy auction at a fraction of what they'd paid. Planted 4,000 new seedlings that will be ready in 8 years. Built a larger farm store with a proper commercial kitchen. Hired full-time employees and seasonal workers. Harper and I came out stronger than we went in. The crisis forced conversations we'd been avoiding and decisions that proved where we stood. She chose our marriage over blood loyalty when it mattered most. I showed I'd fight for what we built. 14 years ago, I bought steep mountain land nobody wanted. Everyone said I was throwing money away. I built something from nothing, through work most people wouldn't have the patience for. When my own brother-in-law tried to steal it through corruption and government abuse, I stayed calm. I built a coalition. I hired the right attorney. I protected my marriage. And I made every single person involved regret the day they decided my land looked like easy money. Some lessons cost more than others. Peter learned the expensive way that you don't target a man's land, his livelihood, or his family. Especially when that man has spent 12 years building something he'll burn down the world to keep. This whole ordeal taught me so much about fighting for what's right, even against seemingly impossible odds and betrayals from those closest to you. Have you ever faced a moment like that, where you had to stand up and fight for everything you'd built? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to hear your stories.